The views expressed on the following program are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and are not necessarily those of WMEL staff, management, or advertisers.
This is Joe Steckler, folks, your host for Helping Seniors, the radio arm of Helping Seniors of Brevard County, Incorporated. The purpose of our organization is to educate, inform, and connect seniors and those that care for seniors to resources so they can have a better chance to age with a little semblance of dignity and a little less worry and strain in their lives. And I'm telling you that the office number for Kay, our information specialist, is 473-7770, 473-7770, and I can promise you one thing. I can promise you that Kay will listen to you, will talk to you, will try to figure out what the problems are, and she will try to connect you to the services you need to resolve those problems. Most of the time we can solve the problem, not always. Sometimes it takes longer than others to solve some problems. But I can assure you that if you don't make the call, if you don't try to solve the problem, you never will solve it. And I can think back over the years I've been doing this radio show. I can remember one of my very first callers, 15 years ago, they told me about something a nursing home had done. And over the next 4 months, the nursing home returned in excess of $30,000 to that family for erroneous charges. Now, that's gospel truth. And the reason I can say that is because I got involved in it. I know about it. I know what happened. You see, most businesses, if you try to point out the rights and wrongs, we all make mistakes, but most people like to correct a mistake. Think about this. You go into the store and you get your change. If they hand you back $2 too much, you go put that in your pocket? I don't think so. Most of us that have a mistake made in our favor will comment about it, return the money, and the same thing for services for people. But in order to try to make it a better world in which to live, it takes everybody to participate. And the people that help us put on this program here, for the first part of the show, I'll read their sponsors: Gentiva Home Health Care, the Eye Institute, Solid Bite Dental Implant, Bill Johnson, Elder Law Attorney. Bill's my panelist today. WMEL AM 1060. Wusthof Hospital Systems, Levin Home Care, Ren Care, which is a medical alert program, folks. It's something a lot of people need, just don't know it. Atlantic Shores Rehabilitation, Ebony News Today, and Barbara McIntyre of Remax Reverse Mortgage. So these are all important sponsors. But a couple of weeks ago, I was asked to speak to a meeting of the guardianship program here in Brevard County. Folks, I tell you, I got there and listened to their networking part of their conversation and realized that the president was a person I've known involved in senior care probably longer than anybody else in this county, a lady by the name of Kathy Rowlands. And I sat there and I listened to the professional guardians, people that work with your families. I listened to their concerns. I listened to what they said, what they had to talk about, and I realized there's just an awful lot that we just simply don't know. And one of the people in attendance there was my panelist today, Bill Johnson. Bill's a member of the guardianship program. Bill, what did you think about the conversation we had before lunch where the one guardian professed such it was, to me, an unusual interest in trying to correctly solve somebody's problem?
Well, I think that was interesting, trying to do the right thing and not getting any cooperation, even when I think what the Guardian was trying to do was what was the legal thing, too. Yeah. I think the legal, ethical, and moral thing, and just getting no help from the medical community.
Yeah.
In fact, threatened.
That was it.
Yeah, threatened by the medical community.
Yeah. There's another part. When Bill did a seminar, and I think he did the seminar, we did it just a couple of days ago.
Yep, Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday. And I want to read from part of this seminar, folks, because this is what the sum and substance of our talk is going to be about today. Bill said in here that the topics to be discussed include the Baker Act, the guardianship process, undue influence, and financial exploitation. The event will also focus on measures you can take to protect yourself and your family, including the execution of advance directives and durable powers of attorney. I'd like to talk for a second first, Bill, about the Baker Act. I'd like for you to explain to people what the Baker Act is, and there are a lot of misconceptions about it.
Well, let's back up even further.
Okay.
When you deal with seniors, one of the things I hear repeatedly talked about by seniors is, I don't want my rights taken away. I don't want my driver's license taken away. I want to stay in my house. Yet, if you ask seniors, how does that all happen? How do you lose your rights? How do you lose your driver's license? How do you stay in your house? They have no idea. So some of the biggest concerns and worries that they have, they don't know how those things happen. So we put it on a seminar to kind of talk about those things. What happens? When do you lose capacity? When are your rights taken away? When do you lose your driver's license? When may you not be able to stay in your house? And that's kind of what the seminar was for the public to learn about those different things.
Well, what do you think are some of the... Okay, you're the guy that opens yourself up to me asking you all kind of questions here. So why or what are some of the most important things the seniors don't understand as to why they do lose these rights?
Well, one is you're presumed to have capacity unless you've been adjudicated incapacitated. So you're presumed to be competent to manage your affairs. Now, the state only steps in, or the law steps in to protect you, if you are incapacitated. And what do we look at for incapacitated people? Well, we look at whether they're being abused, neglecting themselves, or victims of exploitation. I mean, that's really, what we're trying to protect them from.
Well, you said a key thing there, and this is something I could let it pass over, but I don't want to, because you mentioned the word self-abuse.
Right.
And I think this is probably one of the most ignored, misunderstood, and something that happens almost on a daily basis to seniors. They don't realize that they're abusing themselves.
Right. When we talk like Alzheimer's or dementia, a lot of people always jump right to memory. Oh, they can't remember anything. Well, you and me both know that those diseases also affect your executive function, which is your decision-making ability, and also something called insight, your ability to see how bad your own situation has become. And that's why when we show up, sometimes at somebody's house who's got dementia and you walk in, the place is a wreck. There are animal feces all over the ground. They've never, cleaned up. And you ask them, how are you doing? And what do they say, Joe?
They're doing fine.
Yeah, fine.
I could
no
say,
problems here.
Yeah. And the thing is, so many times, Bill, when you, as an interested party, intervene in something like that, the situation could go downhill real fast because they're so accustomed to living in dirt, filth, and everything else. And when you change it, it sort of changes them. You bring other people in, they don't like that.
Yeah, they do not like people coming in their house, even if they are there to protect them, and make sure they eat 3 meals and take their medicines.
But see, a lot of it, I personally think that they don't understand or they're in that bad of shape.
I agree with you. I think they may be frustrated that they can't take care of themselves. But I think you're right. I think they lack the insight to know that they are a danger to themselves.
Yep. And I think that, I've been involved with Alzheimer's work now since actually 1986, when I had come out of the Naval Home and I saw a lot of Alzheimer's patients there. But then when I retired, came to Melbourne and had the Alzheimer's program, I know a lot of things that we used to do in those days about education and support groups and things that, to my knowledge, are not done the same way today that we did them years ago. I think that we've sort of lost some of the focus on understanding what the problem is. We like to say that Alzheimer's is probably one of the fourth or fifth most dangerous diseases known in the United States right now and cause of death, contributing to it. But I think that I in my own lifetime, I've not really witnessed a great effort made to change the status of that. We have some research, but a lot of the research is book research, and we don't have a lot of hands-on research. Is that your experience as an elder law attorney?
Well, I don't think we have a lot of education. People misunderstand what this is all about.
Okay, I agree there. 100%.
Yeah, and I think people are especially busy, and don't have the time or think they don't have the time to go learn about these things. So you end up with, and people may rely on bad sources for information too. You hear that a lot.
Right. But in this case, we always talk about knowledge being power. In this case, when you don't have any education or information all about the disease you're trying to cope with, just sort of scratching the surface should make people want to dig a little deeper and try to figure out how they can do something to help their own families.
Correct.
And this bothers me, Bill.
Well, and that was part of what the seminar was talking about. Under the Baker Act, you can be committed for 72 hours if you are a danger to yourself or others. Well, that includes neglect, like we were talking about, where you are in a situation of self-neglect. So you can be Baker Acted for that. There's another procedure called a guardianship where we can actually go in and have you declared legally incapacitated. And we have an examining committee go out and test you or assess you to see whether or not that is the case. And then your rights can be taken away and placed with a guardian, who again could remove you from your house and put you in a safer situation.
Right.
Now, unless you understand how those things work, you really, it goes back to that expression, we fear the things we don't understand. And that's really what this is about, is, seniors not understanding when these mechanisms get deployed, why they're being deployed or how they're being deployed, just because they simply don't understand it.
Well, in the 27 years that I've been associated working with seniors and all the programs we have, I think one of the most misunderstood elements of control we have is the Baker Act. I think I would really like for you to explain to people what Baker Act is and what it is not. I know that some people, and I want you to comment on this too, some people think that by virtue of the fact that somebody's Baker Act, they're right away treated to shock treatments and everything else. That's not true.
No, they basically bring them into they try to level them off, okay, and get them to a place where they're not, because they're usually agitated. That's usually the main thing. They become violent, or they're very agitated, and the whoever's doing the Baker Act can't, seem to calm them down. So usually they take them to a facility in Brevard, Circles of Care, or 2 West at Woodstock, until they can get them on a drug regimen that will level them off, so that they are not a danger to themselves or others.
Yeah. So to understand a little bit further, I can remember, Bill, years ago when I was the director of the Alzheimer's chapter here, back in the 90s. Actually, our police really didn't have a good understanding
Well, let's back up to that. Who can Baker Act you? Three different people. The police, they show up and they deem that you are a danger to yourself or others. They can Baker Act you, and they take you in and take you to one of those 2 facilities in Brevard County. I got to remember our wattage has increased, so not everything is Brevard County anymore. We're now into Orange and probably Osceola and Seminole and Indian River counties with the new 50,000 watts we have here at the station. So, but anyway, back to that. There are 3 people who can do it. 1 is a police officer. 2 is a physician. And 3 is you can go in front of a judge and ask what we do is an ex parte. That means the other side doesn't have to be present, but you go in front of a judge, present a case that this person's a danger to themselves or others, and then the judge will order the police to go pick up. But it has to be
an attorney that does that.
Well, not necessarily. You can actually do your own ex parte in front of a judge.
How could a person get to a judge, Bill?
Well, what they would do is they would go to the courthouse, and there are coordinators who help people with that process.
They can actually do that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that sometimes we have to realize what are some of the dangers if we don't take action like you and I are talking about right now. What if if a person is doing really strange things, or if they're violent, if you can't control them, if they're doing things that just can be a danger to themselves or a danger to somebody else, and you fail to make that call to the police.
Well, imagine you got somebody our size, just somebody 6'2", 250, who's got dementia, and all of a sudden doesn't recognize, their son or their wife or something, and then all of a sudden thinks they're an intruder in the house, and picks up a knife or God forbid, a gun or something. That can be an extreme danger. I've had it both ways. I've had men with dementia, big men, who have gotten violent with their wives because of, usually it's a medication change or a dosage change that usually sets some of these things off. I've had women who have picked up knives in the kitchen thinking their husband was an intruder and attacked them with the knife. I have one lady on a train who all of a sudden told the conductor that her husband was trying to kill her, and they had to stop the whole train, the Amtrak train, and the police took him to the police station. So all kinds of strange things can happen. And just my experience, I don't profess to have any medical knowledge, but it seems to me whenever they change medications for somebody who's got a dementia or the dosage, a lot of times that makes these people lose their inhibitions, and sometimes they act out violently. It's kind of a side effect.
And consider also if you have someone that you think the world of and you see that they're doing something wrong, doesn't it make more sense, Bill, to, if they won't accept treatment, doesn't it make more sense to take a chance on alienating them maybe for a period of time to get them the right treatment? And there are 2 schools of thought about drug therapy. I know that. But having said that, it seems to me that this is why we have medical people, this is why we have these treatment places, and this is, if we recognize something of severe depression or something like that, it would make more sense to have the people that have the medical knowledge to treat, and drug therapy can be just as advantageous as it can be disadvantageous.
Correct, and it may make sense to get them, under observation for 72 hours and stabilized. And then, they typically release them unless there's some long-term psychiatric problem. Yeah. But for the most part, they're out in 72 hours.
But, Bill, in all your business as being a leading elder law attorney, isn't what we're talking about, the guardianships and dementia and the use of the Baker Act in different situations, it's something that we really don't do a lot to publicize or educate people on?
I would say that's probably true. It's not, you know, in this country, mental health discussions or treatments or education or even funding is very thin. It's just a subject nobody really wants to talk about.
Yeah, I don't. As many radio and television shows as I've done over the years, I don't ever remember seeing any kind of a statistic on the numbers involved in what we're talking about today. Have you ever seen anything?
I don't believe I have. I don't believe I've ever seen how many Baker Acts there are.
Yeah.
You know, the state or the nation.
I go back, Bill, to when I was a young man. I can remember so many small towns in the United States had what we called in those days an insane asylum.
Right.
And we locked people up for this strange behavior. And I think as we look back now, we realize that a lot of the people that were locked up were simply people that had Alzheimer's. And back in those days, we thought they were talking in tongues. They were babbling, and people didn't understand.
And of course, with this graying population that we have, we're seeing huge numbers of people suffering from diseases like Alzheimer's or vascular dementia.
Yeah, that's a part of it. That's another key part that we don't really give a lot of credence to, the vascular dementia. And I've had a couple of doctors on shows that have talked about that because there is so much that we don't understand. We have diseases that are going to affect us as an aging population that we don't really give much credence to right now. We don't think about the effects of what's going to happen. And we think that we can continue to attack this rapidly increasing problem with small amounts of money. It's not. It's a disease that really drains families of their resources. Okay. Roger, we're getting a signal for a mid-show break, folks. We're gonna sign off here for about 3.5 minutes, then Vince will bring us back on the line, and we're going to talk about some other parts of the seminar that Bill talked about here a couple of days ago. I think you'll find it very interesting and very helpful to making some of your own decisions. Stay with us. I'm Joe Steckler, founder and president of Helping Seniors of Brevard. Our mission is to provide seniors with resources and education so they may age with dignity. However, we need your help. Our first benefit auction is on October 17th at Holy Name of Jesus Catholic Church with an incredible collection of unique items. Please call our office at 321-473-7770 to learn how you may purchase tickets or find out more. That's 473-7770.
AM 1060 WMEL.
This is Joe Steckler, folks. We're back live with the second half of the show with Bill Johnson. But before we get into that, I want to remind everybody that the phone number for Kay at the office is 473-7770. And our job is to inform, educate, and connect seniors to resources. The sponsors for the second part of the show include Senior Scene Magazine, and a new issue is out on the streets today, folks. We've got an 8-page newsletter in there and a new article that I wrote. So, I want you to read what I write. So get that Senior Scene Magazine and read that thing. I mean, you might want to tell other people about what we're doing. Hometown News, Spotlight Magazine, Seniors Helping Seniors, The Fountains of Melbourne, Beth Courtney of the Courtney Braswell Financial Team, Canadian Meds of Melbourne, Wiedemann Malik, Vitas Hospice, and Peaceful Beach Mediation. Brooke Goldfarb is an attorney that is trying to reconnect seniors instead of trying to separate seniors as they live longer lives. So there's just a lot to what we need to think about, folks. But before Bill and I get back into exploitation of the elderly, which is what we're going to talk about in the second part of the show, I want to remind everyone, now Bill will make a couple of comments on it too, that October 15th starts the open enrollment period for Medicare Part D, and that lasts until the 7th of December. And I'll ask Lance Jarvis from the Shine office to come on the radio show next week or the following week, and we'll talk about it more. But we've also got a TV show on. If you look on our website, helpingseniors.brevard.org, there's a TV show on there about the open enrollment period. It's an older show, but it still applies. Nothing's changed. However, what has changed, and the reason that more of us who are seniors need to look at this, is that with coming 1 January, there are many, many new aspects of the Affordable Care Act that will come into being. One is going to see an increase in the top 10 medications that seniors take, and there's going to be an average of an 8% cost increase in those drugs. So you may have a good plan now, but you need to look to see what your plan is going to do with regard to the medications and the types of things that you take, because with the open enrollment period, SHINE people can help you possibly get a better plan. Am I correct in that thinking, Bill?
You are correct.
What else would you add about the open enrollment period? What else would you say to our people?
Well, you can go to cms.gov, and you can go on there and click on, I think they have a link to a Medicare Part D website where you can put in your prescription drugs and find out which plans cover your particular drugs.
Yep. But if you go to that SHINE counselor, they've got all that information already. They're like a walking repository. I'm not going to use the other word. It starts with an S. They're like a walking repository of information. Why are you shaking your head at, Bill? You gotta have some fun in life. You gotta have some fun. Okay. Let's talk about exploitation of the elderly. And you said that at the seminar that you all did, Laura Moody was also on there with you.
Correct, and she did a very good job. Laura's with the state attorney's office.
Right.
And she heads up their division, I think, of economic crimes.
Yes.
And part of that is exploitation cases, abuse, neglect, or exploitation cases of the elderly. And, you know, she did part of her speech, she was trying to clear up a misconception a lot of people have. You know, we have, just because you're elderly and you make a bad decision doesn't mean that a crime has been committed. You know, if you enter into a contract and it happens to be a bad contract, you know, that's not something that they go prosecute. However, if you are elderly, which is defined, I think, in the statute as over 55,
right,
and you have, I think, an infirmity of age, I think including a mental infirmity, then they could get involved. So it's not just simply that you're over a certain age that automatically, if you make a bad deal, you got an exploitation case. There is a separate, you know, statute for crimes against the elderly that you can be charged with if you commit a crime against somebody, I think, over 65. But when we're looking at exploitation, what we're looking at is somebody taking advantage of you. And so under that statute, you not only have to be elderly, but you also have to have some sort of infirmity.
Maybe I misunderstood when you talked about exploitation. You said something about, I'm trying to remember how you said it. I had a question about the way you said it. I wasn't sure I understood completely what exploitation really is.
Well, exploitation is where somebody takes advantage of somebody for their own financial gain.
Okay. Like if you were a worker and you worked for another company and that company had you assigned to take care of somebody, say, 8 hours a day, and you sort of ingratiated yourself to these people over a period of time, and they put you on their checkbook,
right,
to pay bills, and you used that money for your own, you wrote checks.
That would be an exploitation case. Or if you were, you know, going door to door selling vacuum cleaners, and you happen to sell a couple in their, you know, 60s who have, you know, beginning dementia, and you sell them 25 vacuum cleaners. That's exploitation.
Does that really happen?
There was a case up in Cocoa Beach not too long ago where this company that sold steaks ended up knocking on the door of this elderly couple and sold them a box of steaks, and then came back the next day, sold them another box, and kept selling steaks to this couple until their entire refrigerator and freezer were filled with steak.
So how did the law get involved in that?
Well, somebody reported it. Somebody, I guess one of their neighbors or friends, reported it, and I believe the state attorney's office prosecuted that case.
That's something I think that our listeners need to understand. Too often, we make light of the fact that, or think that law enforcement doesn't respond adequately. I can tell you, Bill, that in the cases where I've called a state attorney's office or reported somebody for abuse, within 2 hours, there's always been somebody to call on that house.
I would agree with that, but some of those cases are hard to prosecute because somebody takes advantage of somebody with dementia. Okay? Well, we can't use the elderly person as the witness. Because so the victim in the cases is usually unavailable to be a witness due to their dementia. So we can't use them to really prove the case. So we have to prove the case other ways. And, bank records and things like that. So some of them, something bad happened, but we may not have the evidence to move forward with an arrest.
What are some of the records that just, as we hit our 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, all of us should be aware that there are records that we should keep. And as a guy that works with elders all the time, what are some of the more important documents that you think that senior citizens and those that care for seniors should be more cognizant of? What should
you should keep your tax returns for at least 3 years. You should keep all your legal documents, your will and or your trust, your power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, living will, preemie guardian declaration. You should keep records of any transactions that involve capital gains. So if you buy a stock for $10, keep a record of that, because 20 years from now when you go to sell that stock, you may have to prove what you paid for it. So anything that involves capital gains or subject to capital gains tax, you need to keep those records well beyond the 3 years that you would keep tax records.
Wait a minute now.
You need the deed to your house, title to your car, those things.
Okay, but you just talked about capital gain tax.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you pay gains on capital gain tax every year on your taxes?
No, you pay it when you sell the asset.
What is that stuff that I get that says capital gain then?
You may have a mutual fund that is buying and selling things that incur a capital gains tax.
Okay. All right.
So if you're in a mutual fund, you may get assessed capital gains because they're constantly buying and selling stocks and incurring capital gains tax.
One thing that I learned the hard way, folks, and some of it may have happened to you, just because you have a broker, don't always rely on the broker to tell you the bad news sometimes. Mine does, but not everybody's do.
Yeah, and don't rely on your broker to keep the records, especially, look at what happened in 2007. People may have had brokers associated with, like Lehman Brothers or something. They go out of business.
Yes.
Yeah, and banks were buying up other banks. And, I was just today at a bank where I had records that showed that one of the bank they bought had opened an account for these kids. And I had the proof that it was opened, a deposit slip, everything. They couldn't find that account number.
So what do you do now?
So, we're going to go back and try and search with the Social Security number. But otherwise, somebody's got to go at the bank, got to go do some research.
Yeah. Well, the reason I brought this up, Bill, is because a lot of people may not realize that if you have a broker and the broker sells stock for a great loss, that loss can be deducted on your income tax, but in order to deduct it on your income tax, either you, if you prepare your tax, or somebody else that prepares your tax, has to have all the documents. That's why it's so important that you keep copies of all the stuff that Bill is talking about, because I remember one time that there's a legal limit as to how much you can take on as a tax loss each year. And when the mess happened several years ago, I had a one stock loss quite a bit, and as a result, I had a 3.5-year deduction. I could take on my income tax, but I didn't know that. My broker figured it out. My tax preparer figured it out. That's why, we say, I'm not going to pay anybody $100 or $200 to figure out my taxes. Let me tell you, the lady that does my taxes, I won't mention her name because she doesn't want to do more taxes, but this lady has saved me a tremendous amount of money over the years that she's prepared my taxes for me, and it's well worth what I pay her to do it.
And it's money you just would have given away if you hadn't known about it.
Yeah, I would have lost it. What you're saying is I have actually made money because I've paid a very professional person to do my taxes.
Right.
And it's an infinite amount of worry off of my little brain, and I don't have to think about it.
And not all people who do taxes are equal, because I've had them cost me money too. Yeah. And later found out from a different, broker or accountant that they did something wrong and had to go back and amend my taxes.
But did the person that incorrectly did it, they go back and adjudicate it and get it corrected for you?
Well, no, I used a different person.
Yeah. That's something else a lot of people don't. If a tax preparer makes a mistake, they're bound by law to correct it for you.
Right.
There's just so many things, folks, that Bill and I could talk about here that are really, really important for all of us to understand. Some of them are things that most people will never have to use their whole life. But I'll tell you, Bill, over the number of years that I've been doing the radio and the TV and the printed media work and the questions I've had, I had a call last week from a lady, 90 years old, and she had a plumbing problem, and she was in an unincorporated area, which means it's the responsibility of the county.
If you have a plumbing problem, you're supposed to use those things that rhyme with depositories.
Okay. All right. You got
right
me.
Back at you.
You got me. Okay. I'm not going to say. I'll be careful what I say now. But she had to have her yard dug up, and since her income was $1,100 a month, the fact that she had to have her yard dug up was extremely costly to her. Once they got the yard dug up, they found the problem was, in fact, in the street. She went back to the county. They passed the buck from place to place, and evidently resolved in an insurance that the company the county has to cover these kind of things. And from what the lady was telling me, they were wanting to settle for pennies on the dollar, which was nothing. And so the lady called me, and I asked her, how in the thunder did you get my name? She told me, and I recognized the name of the person who told her to call me. It took me 2 hours, but I went through the 6th person I finally got at the county, recognized the problem. I ended up with the risk management people, very nice lady, and she said it did not sound right to her. She said, give her a couple of days, she'll work on the problem, and she will call me back when she gets it resolved. And she said, this lady's entitled to more than what she was probably being offered. And she said, I'll look into it. So I've got the lady's name and phone number. I will call her back, but I also will check with the 90-year-old lady. This is one of the things that we do with helping senior folks. This is why it makes our organization a little bit different. When Bill calls or I call Bill, we send a problem to them, I'll usually call one of Bill's staff members and find out how something got resolved, because it's important to follow up in the business of care of elders, because the problem doesn't always get stated correctly the first time. And one of the things that Kay is able to
That's
find,
part of the problem, too, is a lot of times they don't even know how to phrase the question.
Yeah.
They can explain what's going on, but they don't actually know the question to ask.
And that's why it's important to have what we call information specialists like Kay, because Kay's been doing this for a year and 2 months now, and she probably will be, I know she's listening to the show, and if Kay was on the other line with us, she'd probably say she's learned a tremendous amount in the 14 months that she's had the position, finding out about other things, how they impact on other things.
I get that all the time. I tell them they have to do something with a car title, and they go, well, I'll go down to the DMV and do that. And you go, no, the DMV issues driver's licenses. You have to go to the tax collector's office if you're dealing with a car title. And that's just a simple example of if you didn't know the right question to ask, you wouldn't know where to go to get the right answer.
Well, Kay and I have started doing more shows together over here at the radio station because we have found that when we talk about some of these issues, she can bring in real-life experiences, and our listeners are able to associate more of the problem with their own problem. And that's why I felt it was so, you get all kind of seminars built out there that people that give seminars like you were a part of. But who else was participating? It was you, Laura Moody, who else?
We had a professional guardian by the name of Danica Scuderi, and she talked about guardianship and how that works. And then we had Robin Adams, who is the director of Care Services for One Senior Place Care, and she talked about when they get involved and what care management is, and when somebody needs help, with their care. And that goes back to that whole, self-neglect. And
okay. In your opinion, as an elder law attorney, is all care management equal?
No.
Why not?
No.
Why?
Well, it's just based on, one is, let's go back to, do they have to be licensed? And the answer is no. Anybody can hold themselves out as a care manager.
So that's one of the first things you should ask somebody.
Right. You should ask them what their resume is like.
Exactly right.
What is their experience in doing this? What is their education, their licensures? Because a lot of them are social workers or nurses, but there are people out there who have no experience in doing this. I've
encountered those people before, and
I have too.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. But when you get in this business of caring for people, there are so many ways that an older person can be taken advantage of simply by virtue of the fact that they think that the person they're talking to is young, intelligent looking, dresses well, and speaks what they think is the speaking language. It's going to give them what they need. And it's so hard, Bill, and that's why I wish I could say the magic words that would convince more people to actually call an attorney. People call you with a question, the consultation is free.
Correct.
So why not call an attorney? If you're afraid that you've got a problem that's going to require the services of an attorney, shouldn't that signal a person that they've got a problem they need to do something about?
I would agree with that too, yes.
And ignorance of the law doesn't mean that the law doesn't apply to you. Ignorance of a situation that could adversely or harmfully affect you, strip you of your rights, strip you of your money, or enable somebody that's taking advantage of you to continue to do that, it doesn't make good sense to not put a stop to it.
Correct.
And that's the other part of the equation that we didn't even touch on today. Many seniors are afraid to bring a situation to the light of day. Usually
because the exploiter is another family member.
Right. And that's all the more reason, I think, in my book, Bill, that we have to figure out a better way to...
You and me worked on this a while back on, getting the word out to bank tellers, to report things that they saw that looked kind of fishy.
Yep.
Usually they're one of the few people who gets a little inside glimpse, that when grandma's coming in and, the grandson's bringing her in and telling her what to sign and where to sign and what to put his name on, that should be an indicator that maybe something's a little wrong here.
Yeah. Well, I want to make a plug. We got 1 minute and 27 seconds left. Folks, I'm going to start a new series of columns in Hometown News. The editor and publisher of Hometown News has asked me to write articles that will deal more with services and how things affect seniors. So I'll be asking people like Bill and some others that to help me ghostwrite some of these columns so that I can bring intelligent information to you that will help you as you try to live a life that of productivity and certainly in a less stressful environment. So I give a lot of credit to Hometown News for wanting to do that, Bill. What would you have a last comment for? We've got 45 seconds, 44.
I would just say go out and go to a lot of seminars, meet a lot of people, and get educated.
And when's your next seminar?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I do them at one senior place. If you call them, they can tell you.
All right. Thank you for listening, folks, and thank you, Bill, for doing the show with me today. And I hope you've learned something today, folks. I'll see you next week on the next edition of Helping Seniors. Remember, our auction is on 17 October at Holy Name of Jesus Church. Go to our website, helpingseniorsofbrevard.org, and take a look at all the stuff we have. See you next week. Bye.